All right, so MiniMax M3 just dropped, and people are genuinely asking whether it can go toe-to-toe with ChatGPT 5.6 Sol. The number that got my attention right away, M3's output tokens cost $1.20 per million versus Sol's $30 per million, which is a 25 times gap. Both models launched in mid-2026, so this is as fresh as it gets, and I'm running them through 4 real tests: multimodal quality, API pricing, reasoning, and speed. Every data point comes from official docs or independent benchmarks, no vendor money, no spin. Now, M3 wins on basically every benchmark it chose to publish. But Sol's users keep saying it destroys M3 on chain of thought reasoning. And those two things don't reconcile cleanly, which is honestly what this whole comparison comes down to. So this one is really for developers and teams actively picking a model for API work right now. If you're running high volume pipelines, a 25 times cost gap on output tokens can flip a project from viable to dead on arrival. And picking the wrong model means your outputs start falling apart on the hard stuff before you even notice. Test 1, multimodal output quality. So imagine you're building a pipeline that needs to process video content, and you pick a model that just can't take video as input. You find out mid-build after you've already wired up your whole workflow, and now you have to rip it out, which is a real failure mode and one that's completely avoidable. Looking at the source data, M3 accepts text, image, and video in the same context window, while Sol tops out at text and image with no video input sourced anywhere. M3 hit 83.5 on BrowseComp and 63.7% on SVG Bench, and Sol has 0 published figures on either of those benchmarks. So the on-screen cards are pretty one-sided. M3 takes test 1. Honestly, I was expecting Sol to have at least some published multimodal scores to compare against, but there's just nothing sourced on their side, and native video input alone makes this a clear call. That puts MiniMax M3 up 1-0 over ChatGPT 5.6 Sol after the first test. Test 2, API pricing and token cost. The scenario that actually hurts is when you run a prototype, it works great, you scale it up, and then your bill arrives, and if you pick the more expensive model without doing the math first, that bill can be 10 or 20 times what you budgeted, and that's a project getting killed. When I pulled the published rate cards, M3 input is 30 cents per million tokens, Sol input is $5 per million, and on output, M3 is $1.20 per million. That output gap is 25 times, and OpenRouter reportedly has M3 even cheaper at 24 cents per million with a discount applied. So these are list rates at the high end. To be fair, Sol's pricing is harder to pin down from official sources than M3's, and if you're running standard length requests under 272,000 tokens, Sol's billing is at least predictable within that range. So the gap is real, but if reasoning quality genuinely matters more than cost for your use case, the price difference might just be the cost of doing business. M3 wins this one, and it's not close. A 25 times gap on output tokens is honestly bigger than I expected when I first pulled the numbers, and M3's long context cliff sits at 512,000 tokens, versus Sol's 272,000. So you get more headroom before the 2x surcharge kicks in. That's MiniMax M3 ChatGPT 5.6 Sol 0. Test 3, reasoning on complex multi-step problems when a model breaks down on a hard chain of thought task. You don't always catch up immediately because it gives you a confident looking answer that's just wrong. You ship it, someone downstream catches it, and now you've got a trust problem that's way harder to fix than just picking the right model up front. I went looking for hard numbers on both sides, and what surprised me is how one-sided the published data is. M3 has a SWE bench pro score of 59.0%, terminal bench at 66.0%, and post-train bench at 37.1, which puts it third overall. But Sol has no published figures on any of those benchmarks in any sourced material I could find. The hard truth is that real users consistently report Sol is stronger on chain of thought reasoning, and that's a real signal even without benchmark numbers to back it. So M3 has more transparency because it published scores, but Sol might actually be better at reasoning and just hasn't shown its cards yet. And I can't score what I can't verify. This one's a tie. And honestly, that's the right call given the data. M3 wins on transparency, Sol wins on user reputation, and neither is enough to award a point. So the score stays at MiniMax M3 2, ChatGPT 5.6 Sol 0, 1 tied. Test 4, response latency and throughput. Slow responses in a real-time product aren't just annoying, they break the user experience in a way that's hard to patch after launch. And if you're literally hammering a model with high volume requests, throughput matters a lot because a bottleneck there compounds across every single call in your pipeline. I pulled the Telnix independent benchmark, which ran 480 requests across 6 prompt profiles, and M3 came in at a median 7.56 seconds end-to-end with 144.9 tokens per second throughput. Short context at 1.70 seconds, and long context at 100,000 tokens hitting 13.30 seconds. But for Sol, there are 0 source latency figures anywhere. No published latency data from Sol doesn't mean it's slow. OpenAI's infrastructure is pretty mature, and Sol likely performs well under load, and M3's 144.9 talks on Telnix also dropped to 119.8 talks on Together AI, which is a 21% swing between providers. So take the M3 numbers as directionally useful, not a fixed guarantee. Another tie. And this one I kind of expected once I saw Sol had nothing published, because you can't compare what doesn't exist on one side. So M3 has real third-party numbers, Sol doesn't, and that's genuinely not enough to call a winner either way. Running score stays, MiniMax M3 2, ChatGPT 5.6 Sol 0, 2 tied. So here's where MiniMax M3 clearly wins. It's the only model of the two with native video input, full stop. API costs are dramatically lower at 30 cents per million input and $1.20 per million output versus Sol's $5.30. It's open weight. So local deployment is actually on the table, and it has way more published benchmark transparency than Sol does right now. And here's where ChatGPT 5.6 Sol wins. Real users consistently say it's stronger on chain of thought and complex reasoning, and that user signal is real even without hard numbers. OpenAI's ecosystem is way more mature with the tooling, plugins, and enterprise support all built out, and Sol's production reliability track record is something M3's 1 million context window just hasn't had time to earn yet. Honestly, I was expecting this to be closer on the benchmark side, but Sol just hasn't published the numbers to compete head to head. So here's the decision rule. If you need video input, low API costs, or open weight local deployment, MiniMax M3 is the clear call. And if you need peak chain of thought reasoning and you trust a user reputation signal over published benchmarks, ChatGPT 5.6 Sol is worth the premium.